Trial of the Ancestors explores the Karui afterlife and gives insight into their mysterious mother of death, the god Hinekora. By partaking in the waters of sight, a substance that brings us to the brink of death, we may travel through the well of passing into Hinekora's halls of the dead. Inside, we meet multiple great warriors of the Karui from different time periods. Each of the warrior champions represents a Karui god, some of whom we slaughter in the acts. 2 of the champions are also victims of our campaign, Kaom and Utula. We can use silver coins to bring us to this well, where a familiar face from the not-so-distant past greets us. Silver coins also allow us to participate in the trials, mock warfare between the champions of these halls that Navali now officiates. The trials were invented by Hinekora because the souls of the Karui people were on the verge of madness from isolation and ennui. The trials are intended for the spirits of the greatest Karui warriors to entertain themselves and others for eternity, or at least until the end of time. The end of time is apparently the talk of the halls, but we will get to that later. This underworld is not only populated by souls of great warriors that Hinekora saves when they die, but those souls do not participate in the trials that take place in these halls. While many names in the halls are familiar, some of their appearances are not. Kiloava tells us that the way champions look in the halls is a reflection of their souls. Here, our souls appear as we truly see ourselves. Some of us had pretty big surprises when they woke up in the halls of the dead. We are the only person still alive here, and that's because we are destined to come to these halls, according to Navali. Navali is not one of the warriors, but she acts as Hinekora's spokesperson. Hinekora does have a champion representing her tribe in the trials, though. Navali greets us by saying, "Your coming was foretold, but you are decades early. How odd. I am Navali, once a Hatungo for my people, now a revenant in service of the Mother of Death." I am going to do an entire video on Navali and Hinekora, as there is an absolutely staggering amount of information and speculation surrounding what they say that covers the entire past and future of Path of Exile's story. One might call it the future past even. But trying to cover the scope of the lore in Trial of the Ancestors with one video is too much, even for me. Instead, this video will focus on the more factual information about the Halls of the Dead, the Chieftains, and the gods they represent. There are some differences between Navali now and how we knew Navali before. Navali was a Hatungo for her people, meaning a wise person. When we encountered Navali in the past, she was given the power of prophecy through Hinekora's sight. Specifically, Navali had a monkey named Yama the White, who held a seeing stone, and both Yama and the seeing stone had a hair of Hinekora's dark knowledge. Where the seeing stone would show Navali prophecies, Yama would guide Navali out of those visions. Yama the White is nowhere to be seen, but this is one of the many moments where fact and speculation will be in 2 different videos. All I can say for sure is that Yama the White is not with Navali here. Now, in Trials, Navali is an interpreter of death and a faithful servant of prophecy. By interpreter of death, she means for Hinekora, the god called the Mother of Death, and the one who gathered every soul in the halls, in some ways including ours. Hinekora has plans for us, and we need to be in these halls for those plans. But that's for the other video as well. I'll go over each champion, starting with those who died most recently and going back in time from there. Utula is the most recent champion, as he was a normal mortal in the present day before he got molded by Kitava, the god Utula represents in the trials. None of the people in the halls seem fazed by Kitava having representation here, even though Kitava's presence threatened Rayclast, and when bad things happened to Karui, many would blame them on Kitava's influence. In Act 5, we learn that Kitava's insatiable hunger threatened the life of the other gods, and so they asked Hinekora to kill Kitava for his transgressions. Hinekora did not kill Kitava, but punished him by tying him to a rock and leaving him without food or water until we killed the beast, actually. Navali says of Kitava, "We do not despise Kitava. He is a blind child cursed with endless hunger, and he knows no better." Hinekora foresaw his fall, and we have already mourned his passing. Utula, on the other hand, has caused some unrest among the champions. Utula's life was much different than anyone else here. Utula grew up in the slave pens of Oria. He wasn't taught the Karui way, he never saw Namakanui, and he had to obey the rules and whims of his captors. The way means nothing to me. Where were my fellow Karui tribes when we prisoners were rotting in slave pens since the time of Lioneye? I was born into slavery. I never had a choice. I refuse to continue being a prisoner in my own afterlife. He started an uprising against his Templar captives in his life, and now he feels trapped again in his death. About the Halls of the Dead, Utula says, "I didn't even know about this place. I grew up in the slave pens and my knowledge of my own culture was fragmented at best. When the blood spilled out of me and my heart stilled, I thought I was finally free. No, I'm dead, but I'm still imprisoned." Some of the chieftains understand his outrage, but many more are concerned with his presence, fearing he might try to consume all the souls in Hinekora's domain as Kitava once threatened. Akoya says, "I believe in the traditional and unchanging way, but Utula wants to tear it all down. I fear he is seeking to fulfill Kitava's vow. We must show him how wrong he is." Navali acknowledges that Utula was corrupted by Kitava, and that we had to separate his spirit from his altered flesh so that he could be allowed in these halls. But Navali says she and Hinekora see Utula as a hero for bringing vengeance upon the Templar slavers. Utula has earned his place in the halls of the dead, even if he doesn't want it. Hinekora is either unaware of or unfazed by the threat of uprising from Utula, and Kitava is allowed the honor of representation in the trials, even while Utula yells about fulfilling Kitava's promise to devour all the souls in Hinekora's domain. Although Kaom is the other champion we encounter in the Acts, the next most recently mortal champion, chronologically, is Ahuana. Ahuana is a cheery younger woman, and her accent resembles more Utula than the heavier Karui accents of other champions. That is because Ahuana is half Karui, half eternal, with her mother being Hyri and her father being Victario, two of the most important figures in history during the recent cataclysm that happened 300 years ago. I will try to explain as briefly as possible Victario and Hyri, although I recommend my videos on Act 3 and the Karui for more in-depth info. Hyri and Victario both fought alongside High Templar Vol against Eternal Emperor Chittus in the Purity Rebellion that happened 2 years before the Cataclysm. Hyri is a Karui woman, the niece of Kaom, who trained alongside Vol's archers to bolster Kaom's army against the Eternal Army of Lioneye. Karui men are not allowed to wield bows or any projectiles according to a tabukai or sacred code of the Karui. Kaom interpreted that to mean men couldn't, but women could, and Hyri became a great warrior in her own right. Victario was a poet who used his persuasiveness to influence the downtrodden masses to assist in the rebellion against the Emperor. Victario had set up secret passageways all under Sarn to spread plans of the rebellion. His lover, Marilyn, was killed by Diala during the rebellion. After the rebellion, Hyri and Victario got together and had Ahuana. But Hyri wanted to return to Namakanui, and Victario wanted to remain in Sarn. Hyri led the united Karui forces out of Sarn and back to Namakanui, presumably before the Cataclysm, as Ahuana remembers the Cataclysm but not her father. Ahuana uses bows like her mother, as the Ramako tribe does not follow the tabukai banning projectiles, for anyone. the ancient Tavukai against the use of projectile weapons is not a rule that applies to us. It was a matter of pride for those tribes that lauded brutish men with large axes. The Ramako tribe prefers to fell warriors like that with well-placed arrows, long before their axes ever come close. Hairi is not in the halls of the dead, which confuses Ahuana and upsets Kaom. We as players know that Hairi is one of the Legion generals frozen in endless battle, but it has never before been explained that these generals we fight are the actual generals, and not just shadows, representations, or ghosts of them. We learn from Ahuana that Hairi was taking an army raised from multiple tribes to deal with a strange threat on the edge of Namakanui, when she and her legion vanished without a trace. Kaom is angry that Hairi is not here, even though his tribe's Hatungo, Labianja, believed Hairi damned herself by breaking the Tavukai. But that is not a rule the Ramako tribe follows. I was certain there would be no dishonor in the eyes of the gods, yet Navali remains cryptic on her absence. This confirms that the Ramako tribe not abiding by the projectile Tavukai is a long-standing belief, not one Ahuana made up. We, as players, already knew that Hairi is part of the Legion League mechanic, stuck in the domain of timeless conflict. And now we know that Hairi and her warriors disappeared suddenly after dealing with a strange threat on the edge of Namakanui, that threat being related to Legion somehow. After we have fought Hairi in the domain of timeless conflict, their dialogues change. Ahuana is convinced that Hairi does not need help and is fighting a battle that is very important if she has not reached out. Interestingly, both Kaom and Navali think that Karui should bring more warriors to this battle in the domain to help Hairi and her legion win this war. Navali even says, "We will lay waste to the entity that controls it for daring to disrespect our people so grievously." We as players aren't sure what entity controls this domain, or even that there was a specific entity controlling it. This domain was outside of Hinekora's sight, in the realm of speculation and another video for our purposes. Ahuana represents Ramako. Ramako is the father of light and the father of the sun, which are not the same duty. Ramako has always been the father of light, but it is his marriage to, or traditions with, Sione, mother of the sun, that give him his second title. We are going to hear traditions a few times, and I'm pretty sure it's just code for getting busy, although some use it in context more like marriage. Anyway, Sione, mother of the sun, and Lanihua, mother of the moon, are two gods that are not represented in the trials by any champions. It becomes apparent pretty quickly that these two are almost certainly Solaris and Lunaris, meaning we have now seen the Asmiri, Eternals, Meraketh, and Karui consider Solaris and Lunaris as their gods. I will discuss more about the relationship of all the Karui gods after we go through the chieftains, as each chieftain representative brings a different perspective to the gods' relationships. For now, what I want to establish is that Ramako represents the day and is married to the sun, whereas his brother god, Rongokurai, is night, and the sun's sister is the moon. What's interesting is that the name Ramako has been invoked casually by Karui throughout Path of Exile. The Marauder PC says, "It is good to feel your warmth again, Ramako, father of light, when entering Sarn." His brother, Rongokurai, is a god we have not seen or heard of before this point. Trust me, I have looked. Perhaps followers of Rongokurai died off, and with it his relevance. It's interesting that the Marauder brings up Ramako in Sarn, but we will get to that. When we first encounter Kaom in-game, he is a spirit long after his body has died. Kaom was alive during the Purity Rebellion, along with Akoya, Kiloava, and Rakiata. In fact, Kaom is the reason those three died. Kaom wanted to unite all of the Karui into one tribe under his leadership, and to do so, he had to overcome the chieftains of those other tribes. Before now, we had seen Kaom's conquest described on the Ngamahu, Valako, and Tasalio's sign rings, respectively. After Kaom defeated the other chieftains, High Templar Vol asked him to bring his united Karui warriors to fight against Marcius Lioni on the southern part of Rayclast, where we start our own journey. After Kaom succeeded in defeating Lioni's forces, he wanted more. He wanted to take Rayclast's lands for the Karui, something no other Karui leader had done before. Kaom says, uniting the tribes was a worthy endeavor. Invading the mainland, however, was a fool's errand. Rayclast has only ever been an accursed place, and no true Karui should ever step foot on. Every empire that has ever arisen there eventually collapsed under the weight of its own disease. Kaom became corrupted on Rayclast, went mad, killed 500 of his own warriors, and then his soul was captured by Malachi as fuel for the nightmare for over 300 years. In general, pretty bad times. Kaom describes it as, my dream, my nightmare, seemed without end. I couldn't think, couldn't hope, couldn't fight to escape. There was only madness and pain. When we kill Kaom in Malachi's nightmare realm, his soul is freed and brought to these halls of the dead. In thanks for freeing his soul after endless torment, Kaom has made no argument against our presence in this sacred place. Consider us even. I owe you nothing. Neat. In these trials, Kaom is representing Ngamahu, Mother of Fire, instead of Tukohama. This confused me at first. Kaom in life strived to emulate Tukohama, as he felt Tukohama was the embodiment of the Karui way that Kaom wanted to spread to Rayclast. I thought perhaps Kaom felt betrayed by Tukohama, as during his madness he hallucinated that Tukohama had a gift for Kaom and his people in the heart of the beast. I dreamed of the north, of an offering left to us by Tukohama, an offering that will save the Karui. I needed only to take it. Kaom leading 500 warriors on this trip into mainland Rayclast is the same moment that Hairi left for Namakanui with her daughter Ahuana and the rest of the Karui who had fought in the rebellion. Both Hairi and Lavianja, Kaom's Hatungo, tried to warn Kaom that his visions from Tukohama were falsehoods. We descended into the heart of Rayclast, and there he came to me, Tukohama. He asked of me a sacrifice. I gave it willingly. My axe fell 500 times, the jade drinking its fill of Karui blood. Tukohama was pleased. Kaom's warriors died, and Kaom remained, haunted eternally by his mistakes and his need for conquest and bloodshed. That would be a pretty decent reason to turn away from Tukohama, but it turns out that Kaom is actually part of the Ngamahu tribe. The Ngamahu and Tukohama tribes are pretty close-knit. Tribes are also not steadfast or locked in to worshipping one and only one Karui god. It is confirmed to us in the halls that for sure Kaom's tribe worshipped Ngamahu because they had the body of the sleeping god Ngamahu. Kaom tells us that for countless generations, a small number of my tribe secretly watched over Ngamahu as she slept. Before I was of age, my father's father allowed me to look upon her sleeping face. Looking past the inherent strangeness of watching people while they sleep, this puts into question the physical location of the bodies of other gods. Kitava had been stuck in a rock, and that rock was used to make a statue of innocence. Does that mean Tukohama was somewhere near the mudflats on Rayclast, rather than the islands of Namakanui? Were there people present when Ngamahu woke up, and if so, how is it that no one knows where she and many other gods are? The absence of other gods was previously easy to handwave as a gameplay limitation. We couldn't meet and fight literally every god that has ever been mentioned. But this insight makes the gods waking up more grounded. It implies physical traveling. It begs the question of the original location of their body when they woke up. And it opens up the possibility of running into more gods in the future, especially ones not on Rayclast. So why would Kaom of the Ngamahu tribe have such reverence for Tukohama? In the past, the tribes of Tukohama and Ngamahu were the most powerful out of any Karui tribes. However, this meant that both tribes wanted to prove themselves the strongest and fought each other for the top spot. Their constant fighting weakened both tribes and made both vulnerable to other tribes becoming strongest. Tukohama and Ngamahu made traditions so that their tribes would stop fighting each other and they could retain their power at the top. This unity led to the forging of Ngamahu's axe, inspired by Tukohama being the first to put axes in Karui hands. This is the axe that we see Kaom using in his nightmare, passed down in the Ngamahu tribe. It also led to the creation of Ngamahu's sign, the ring which was given to the Tukohama tribe and passed down to Akoya. Akoya is the chieftain for the Tukohama tribe, and a staunch supporter of following the Karui way. Akoya is like Kaom in that strength is most important to her. She says, why should we subsist in harmony with the land when we have the strength to be its masters? She tells us in great detail of her battle with Kaom, dramatically setting the scene for their long one-on-one fight. She seems to admire that Kaom was able to defeat her and that he gave her a warrior's death rather than leave her broken on the sands. Her attitude reveals just how much the Ngamahu and Tukohama tribes of fire and war have in common. Even more than Kaom, though, she compares her fellow chieftains to their alignment with her perception of the Karui way. Akoya explains to us the difference between Karui, which is anyone born of Karui descent, and Nakura Makoi, which she calls those who comprise our culture. They must be followers of the way, and they must have passed their test of adulthood at the Isle of Shrikes or elsewhere. A great warrior does not have to be Karui by blood to become Nakaru Makoi. The Isle of Shrikes is actually a location from Act 4 of Path of Exile 2, somewhere that the Kalgur who have settled on Rayclast are traveling to on their great quest of colonization again. It will be interesting to see the Isle of Shrikes, since it is a location multiple chieftains here have referred to going to as part of their journey to become adult and legitimized leaders. When Navali says we are decades early to visit these halls, maybe it is because our future self will have gone through the tests of the Isle of Shrikes, and become a worthy Nakura Makoi in that way. But we're gonna stick to the facts here. I need like a buzzer or something to keep me off of these theory trails. If you talk to Akoya after Act 4, but before defeating Tukohama, she says, like many others, the Karui gods have awakened, but aside from Tukohama and Kitava, we have heard nothing of their activities. They walk Rayclast like in times of old, so where are they? The chieftains here are able to speak with their descendants who seek wisdom from ancestors, so that is presumably how Akoya knows that Tukohama and Kitava are awake. But why is she receiving intel about these two gods? Kitava makes sense because Karui people would be enslaved in Oriath and thus see Kitava's rampage. But Tukohama? Tukohama is on Rayclast. He's not on Namakanui. He's not in Oriath. It doesn't seem like the descendants are actually the ones telling about the gods' awakening. It seems Hinekora, or more likely Navali as proxy, is telling the chieftains. Akoya continues, our descendants come to us and ask us when the gods will return home. For this we have no answer. Even Hinekora seems unwilling to speak on what she sees. Is Hinekora only telling the chieftains about these two gods because we are here and she knows their fate? What we will do to them? We are welcomed in these halls, but Hinekora must know that we are going to kill Tukohama and Kitava. Once we have killed Tukohama, Akoya is furious with us. You have wounded us, outsider. Tukohama plays a very real role in our cultural and spiritual lives. With the defeat of our god, my tribe will suffer a mark of shame and a spiritual restlessness that I cannot overstate. I understand why you did what you did, and I will try to remain fair to you, but I am not certain I can ever forgive what you've done. Tukohama is a god we learn quite a bit about before now, so I will keep it brief. He is the father of war, the first to put axes in Karui hands. While he was a more violent god, he was also deeply respected by many Karui. He appears in Kitava's hunger story, is referenced by multiple generations of Karui, and we have slain him. Kiloava of the Valako tribe is known as the first herald of war. Unlike Akoya, Kiloava was not a young chieftain ready for an epic fight when Kaom came to challenge him. He tells us, "Many think I was defeated by Kaom in some grand battle, but I was 74 when he took my head." He essentially bullied an old man. The ring Kaom took, Valako's sign, had been passed down in Kiloava's tribe for generations, like Akoya's. But Kiloava says when he put on the ring, it did something it never had before. It surged with the power of the storm. So I appointed myself the Herald of War, and I used the power of Valako's sign to win many great battles. He says Kaom just finished what he had started. Kiloava seems generally unserious, and is most excited that he gets to be a young man again in the afterlife and have traditions with everyone in the halls, except Ikiaho. Wait, everyone? Really? Anyway, his lack of seriousness extends to his choice of god. He reiterates that warriors switch between tribes for many reasons, and even whole tribes will switch allegiance, as we Karui are a nomadic people, in the physical and spiritual sense. When I call my tribe the Valako tribe, yes, we are. But at one time we followed Tukohama, and at another Tasalio, and then Valako again before that. Essentially, each god must prove themselves to us the same way we prove ourselves to each other. Perhaps this wanderlust is why Kiloava has a complicated relationship with the god of his tribe, Valako. Valako is called the father of the storm. Valako has never contacted Kiloava besides the activation of the ring. Valako is more like our tribe mascot than an actual figure of leadership or aid. Valako is one of the gods in the story of Kitava's hunger, and he plays a main role, like Tukohama, Hinekora, or Kitava. Valako takes off his jaw to put Kitava on a hook, which is one of the artifacts we collect. That implies that Valako was an active god, or at least as active as Tukohama, and that makes it even more strange that out of the main characters of that story, Kitava's hunger, we have seen or heard nothing from Valako, and neither has Kiloava. Rakiata is the chieftain of the Tasalio tribe, and they are the only one to not recount how Kaom defeated them to get Tasalio's ring. Rakiata is untraditional compared to the other chieftains, even in fighting. Even in my earliest memories, I was training for battle. I do enjoy fighting, but not the way others around me did. To them, it was a savage contest of dominance and manhood. To me, there was an elegance to warfare. It had an ebb and flow, like the tide. It was a kind of dance. Even stranger, Tasalio's ring wasn't passed down for generations to Rakiata. Rakiata found a ring on the shore one day bearing Tasalio's graven pattern. It had washed up from the ocean, and I still believe it was a gift from him. It has a great power within it, but I never used it. I didn't need to. We know that Rakiata is the chieftain Kaom defeated to get the ring. It says Kaom took Rakiata's head and hand. So why was Tasalio's ring gifted so recent in comparison to Valako's and Ngamahu's? Those rings were passed down between chieftains for generations before being in the possession of Rakiata's contemporaries, Akoya and Kiloava. If we consider that God's bodies are physically present somewhere in the world, Is Tasalio somewhere in the ocean and the ring happened to wash ashore? Rakiata is just extremely interesting. Ikiaho and Rakiata sneak out of the halls of the dead together to see the moon and sea for a bit. There is a forgotten passage, a narrow crack in the earth that leads to the main well, though the dead just find themselves back here after a few minutes. Still, that few minutes on the ocean, seeing the living world again, glorious. This means that the Well of Passing is a bit more physical and literal than might be assumed. Wherever the Well of Passing is physically located, that we portal to with our silver coins, is connected to the ocean. I imagine this is a location the Hinekora tribe would know about, much like how the Ngamahu tribe guards Ngamahu's body. In addition to all of this, receiving Tasalio's gift directly, sneaking out of the halls of the dead, Rakiata also brings up a fabled weapon that their tribe guarded, that Eternals came and attacked their tribe for. Rakiata says, "They were in search of an ancient and powerful weapon from our myths, but we only had a single piece of it. Their chieftain and their father were killed, so Rakiata took up arms to defeat the invading Eternals. Once they were dead, knowing that more would come if we had what they wanted, I entrusted Tasalio with our piece of that fabled spear." I don't think Rakiata means they literally gave Tasalio this piece of spear, but rather that Rakiata put the piece in the ocean so that it was in Tasalio's domain. While Rakiata tossed the piece in the ocean, they felt its power. In the few moments I held just a piece of it, my hand was permanently scarred, as if I'd been burned by unseen and unfelt heat. My first thought was, oh, maybe that's Solarai's spear. But we see that spear intact and whole in Heist, with no mention of it being in pieces. In addition, while we hear from Adia that Solarai's spear was forged alongside another weapon from Lundara to unite the Marikath people, we have no reason to assume that weapon is also a spear. When hope was but a memory, the twin sister Sekimas, Solarai and Lundara, arose to unite the Marikath. They wielded the essence of gold and silver. The spear is one of the two weapons that forged us. In fights with Solaris and Lunaris, Solaris does wield a spear, but Lunaris wields sickles. I do not think that this weapon is related to Solaris and Lunaris. So what kind of weapon would a Karui tribe have a piece of that the Eternals wanted? We have seen weapons of divinity burn those who are corrupt. Dominus trying to wield Innocence's sign of purity, for example. Valenta tells us that Dominus couldn't even bear to touch the thing, and muses that because corruption and divinity are diametrically opposed, if the sign of purity is a repository for the power of innocence, Dominus could never have wielded it, being steeped as he was in the opposing power of the beast and corruption. Rakiata died before the Purity Rebellion, and thus before the Cataclysm. Why would Rakiata be so steeped in corruption that she could not hold a divine object? I think that this weapon is not divine, but corrupt. It is a piece of an ancient and powerful weapon from our myths, but that could still be from the time of Adthiri or from the beast's creation before that. We know that High Templar Dominus and Venarius before him were incredibly interested in thaumaturgical artifacts like map devices. They referred to these as eternal artifacts, hoping to understand what Malachi and company were doing on Rayclass before the Cataclysm. But not all of these eternal artifacts were made by Malachi. Some map devices, for example, were used in the time of the Waters of Decay, thousands of years ago. This piece of a spear could be from a corrupted thaumaturgical item, something related to Nightmare. The fact that Rakiata, the only chieftain we have seen directly chosen by their god, as in the person in the tribe to directly receive a god's gift, would be much more likely to lean towards divine than corrupt. I'm not sure what I think this spear is, but I would love to hear theories about what the spear might be or who it might have belonged to. The only object that came to mind was the geomantic gyre. a staff released in Crucible League that says, "The last Titans forged a staff that could safely hold the first unearthed virtue gem." It's an ancient weapon with the intent of holding gems from the source of corruption, but the staff is intact in-game, so who knows. Anyway, the god of Rakiata's tribe, Tasalio, is the father of water, and we don't know much else about him. He is not featured in the story of Kitava's hunger, he is not referred to casually by other Karui, and the only mention of him before this league was the Tasalio's sign ring. There is an unknown stretch of time between Kaom, Akoya, Kiloava, and Rakiata, and the next warrior, Ikiaho. Ikiaho is the chieftain of the Arohongui tribe. Both Ikiaho and Arohongui are anomalies amongst these halls. The time period in which Ikiaho was alive is unclear, although we know that she died long before Rakiata, so we never met in life. But here in the halls of the dead, they're my closest friend. In death, I actually feel understood. For that, I can never begrudge this place. Ikiaho is considered strange for not being interested in going through the traditions with any of the other chieftains while they spend their eternal lives here. Because she is unwilling to get down like that, the others claim she has a frozen heart. Ikiaho's lack of desire could be ace representation, which we love to see, but it also might have to do with this bombshell. Ikiaho tells us that she has always been fascinated by the pursuit of knowledge. There is a pattern underneath everything we see. This pattern preceded even the gods. If something in the world around you works a certain way, it will always work that way. If it does not, something else is happening and you must investigate. Ikiaho was seeking deep knowledge about existence itself, how the world works, and why. In life, I followed these questions to the heart of the pattern, and it took me to a vast lake, but I do not remember what I found there. Ikiaho traveled to the Lake of Kalandra, seeking answers to something, either the cause of some pattern or the cause of a disruption of some pattern, but she came back from the lake not remembering what she found. In Kalandra League, the ancient etchings say Kalandra found the lake and watches humanity from there, that one day they will understand what it is to be alive, and they will wonder why they are. I will give them guidance. More than that, I will not say. I will spare them the pain of knowing. Maybe Ikiaho not remembering what she learned at the lake is her being spared the pain of knowing the answers by Kalandra. We know that when Kalandra tries to escape the lake, she knows that she has left, but can't remember any time spent outside of the lake. I theorize that the lake actually mirrors anyone who enters it, and that one version stays inside the lake at all times. Could this have happened to Ikiaho? Could that explain why she is so different from the other Karui chieftains? I wish she remembered what she wanted to talk to Kalandra about, but Ikiaho tells us very little about her life before her death, besides that she felt misunderstood. The god Arohongui, daughter of the moon, is unique because she is the daughter of two gods. Thus, she is born divine rather than ascending to godhood. Arohongui is one of the minor characters in Kitava's hunger story. She is the daughter of Lanihua, mother of the moon, and allegedly Ramako. More on that later. I believe this is the first confirmation of fully divine lineage in-game. I had previously thought that Kitava, Sin, Innocence, Solaris, and Lunaris might be wholly divine, because they seemed the most powerful or oldest or primal gods. We know for certain now that Innocence and Sin were once mortals, as revealed in Sanctum League. Ikiaho says about Arohongui that, alone among the gods, she has no agenda of her own. The rest all seek something endlessly, whatever it was that gave each of them a divine spark, but Arohongui was born divine. If Kitava was born divine, that wouldn't make much sense. Kitava seeks to consume everything, and his consumption is his hallmark of godhood. Solaris and Lunaris, aka Sione and Lanihua, are still up for debate, but since Arohongui is Lanihua's daughter, I think Ikiaho might mention if Lanihua was also born divine. Her divine lineage does not seem to give Arohongui more advanced powers than the other gods, but it does make her power more predetermined, as in she has inherited her power rather than become so good at one thing or so enveloped in one pursuit that she achieved godhood in that realm. Ikiaho might not have much to say about her own life, but she has many incredibly tasty bits of information about Arohongui and the other gods. But let's keep going. I put Maata after Ikiaho because I know for sure he lived during the time of the Val, before or during the time of Adziri, while the Val were a prominent and threatening force on Rayclast. Maata's soul appears in the halls as that of an old, wizened man. He views warfare differently than others, saying he practiced a very different type of combat, one that operated in ways that we Karui normally disdain. I was a diplomat, a peacemaker, and an ambassador. He died of old age rather than war and sees that as an honor and emblem of his good strategy. Living during the height of the Val, Maata had to bend the meaning of the Karui way so he and his tribe could survive. My fellow Karui never wanted to face the hard truth. If the Val wanted to wipe us out, they could have. They wouldn't even have needed to invade us, and our lauded might would have been useless. Rather than warring with the Val, an impossible task, he brokered peace with them, even bringing unmatched prosperity to his tribe through his negotiations and concessions. Maata knew the overwhelming strength the Val possessed, aided in large part by their use of virtue gems. Maata explains that some Karui tried to use virtue gems themselves, called Tears of Magi at the time, and they became filled with rage and unnatural strength, and we had to put them down, then burn their bodies. Their mere proximity made others sick too, so for every warrior that transgressed, 5 others gave their lives to protect the rest of us. It is interesting that recent lore has focused on groups of people who cannot or will not use virtue gems. The Kalgur, whose ancestors were corrupted by gems, and modern Kalgur don't believe the gems hold power, the Asmiri, who have strictly forbidden the use of gems, and the Karui, who get sick with blood corruption that can spread to others who did not even touch virtue gems. I sense there is some deeper meaning or logic behind which groups can and can't use the gems, or what effects the gems have on them, but that's yet another rabbit hole. Even though Maata has a different approach to war than most of the chieftains, he agrees with Akoya, who follows the Karui way of war rigidly, about Utula being an unwelcome addition to the halls. Utula believes in everything I have fought against my entire life, and my entire death. You can't live in a beautiful forest if you burn it down. I understand why Utula was given a place here, but I still think it is a step in the wrong direction. While Maata's peacemaking ways may have been beneficial in the time of the Val, I must say you can't make peace with your slave captors, Maata. It's indicative of the amount of time between Maata and Utula's lifetime and life experience. Maata believed that all life is interconnected, that existence is inextricably linked with all life. But that was within the Karui. Maata would have never dealt with Templars in power. The Val had slaves, but Maata made peace with and avoided the Val, so he never experienced being a slave. But he probably witnessed how they treated slaves. While Maata does not agree with Utula's methods, he does agree that questioning the halls of the dead is worthwhile. Hinekora brings our souls here after we die, but where do the souls of other peoples go? Where would we have gone? We assume the alternative is oblivion, but nobody knows for certain. These unanswerable questions plague me at night when I am trying to sleep. It is interesting that no other peoples have spoken of their afterlife, even as a concept, but the Karui afterlife in these halls is very real. Tawhoa is both the son and father of the forest. Considering Ramako is called the father of the sun after his traditions with Sione, mother of the sun, and Arohongui is daughter of the moon because Lanihua, mother of the moon, is her mother, you would be forgiven for thinking this is an I'm my own grandpa situation. Instead, I think his title of father and son is less literal, but represents Tawhoa's interest in the cyclical nature of time. Maata says Tawhoa alone has the perspective of the ages, of centuries of life, growth, death, and decay. We exist within a grand cycle, one that extends far beyond the outcomes of petty battles or even great wars. Tawhoa stands apart from all this, aiming not for any grand goal but simply to teach. Tawhoa's perception of time sounds a lot like Hinekora's, thinking in cycles and using the past to predict the future. How, or if, Tawhoa's philosophy differs from Hinekora's, I'm not sure. Perhaps it is a more Buddhist interpretation of accepting the cycle, rather than a psychic or prophetic reading of the cycle through visions, like Hinekora has. Tawhoa has appeared in the lore before, as a minor character in Kitava's Hunger story. In Tawhanuku's dialogue, which is primarily parables about the other chieftains, Tawhoa is the only god who appears as a physical character in a story, and he appears not in Maata's parable, but in the dialogue about Tawhanuku's death. I'll summarize since it's long, but she describes a traveler walking through a forest grove who sees Tawhoa. Tawhoa and the traveler watch seeds grow into oaks, that drop seeds, that grow into oaks, cyclical life, etc. The traveler asks what happens to the seeds that never grow, and Tawhoa points to Hinekora, walking through the forest and picking up the seeds to take to her underworld. Tawhanuku says, the traveler shed a single tear, for he finally understood. I'm not sure what this means. If Tawhanuku was never actually alive, and is just a spirit that was brought to the underworld, or if she is represented by the traveler in the story. What we can see is that Hinekora and Tawhoa are closely aligned philosophically. Kahuturoa is the chieftain representing Rongokurai, father of night. There is no doubt that Kahuturoa has been here the longest of any other chieftain. He has been here thousands of years, living at some point during the Val's reign, but long before Maata's time. The Val were in power since before the beast was created, up until the fall of the Val, which may have hundreds or thousands of years between them. Kahu has been fighting in the trials for so long, he is considering joining Utula's uprising to escape them. Utula has the right idea. If I want to leave the halls of the dead and go to the chambers of the dishonored, where they drink and carouse for eternity, why shouldn't I? Down with tyranny! According to Kahuturoa, Namakanui is not a physical location necessarily. It is whatever place they have brought the Karui way to. Outsiders that don't understand us often mark Namakanui in a particular place on the map, but that is a mistake we don't care to correct. It is better that the Val don't know where we are. Kahu has seemingly not been getting updates from descendants because he was not aware of the fall of the Val, or the recent cataclysm, or the Templars becoming a powerful force. As we progress through the acts, we update him on the status of the world, and each bit is a revelation. He was at least aware that the Asmiri were planning on moving down from the mountain ranges, which means either Kahu died not long before the fall of the Val, or that someone, be that descendants or people in the tribe of Rongokurai, informed him of the Asmiri desire to leave the Asmiri mountain ranges, but not of the fall of the Val. From there, he's been in the dark. We tell him the Asmiri became Eternals, and they died too. And he brings up the golden cult they banished to Oriath, which we inform him, yes, the Templars did take over the world, and oops, that empire is destroyed as well. I think that Kahu is much more ancient than Maata, who I believe lived around the time of Athiri, before the fall of the Val though, because Kahuturoa then asks about the Mariketh in their lush plains with rivers and forests. Nanette tells us this was thousands of years ago, when the plains were not a desert. Then Kahu asks about the Ezamites, who suffered from effects of the cataclysm, although we describe it as a plague to him, which is an interesting choice of words. We know that effects of corruption made Karui sick with a blood corruption. Perhaps this plague is like that, rather than just physical devastation of the lands of Ezamir. Either way, after informing Kahu that Ezamir is mostly barren, he asks us about the Kaltu, saying they had the best wines, feasts, and women. And the player character and myself agree we have never even heard of the Kaltu. Who could this be referring to? Maata is the only chieftain who has dialogue in response to this, saying, "The Kaltu. I vaguely recall hearing about them once as a child, but they were long before my time." I assume Maata is the only one to respond because his life was closest in the timeline to Kahuturoa. But by his time, the Kaltu were long before. I can't say for sure who the Kaltu are, but I suspect this dialogue was put in-game to indicate that we will learn who they are at some point, be that a future league or in Path of Exile 2. They could be what we call the Primeval Vol, people like All and On, but Primeval indicates they existed way before the Vol, and Kahuturoa lived during the Vol's reign. I don't think it's the ancient Kalgurans either, as they visited Rayclast after the fall of the Vol. Likely the Kaltu lived somewhere on or near Rayclast that is no longer inhabited, at least not knowingly inhabited. Either that or more tinfoil theory, I'm doing it, the Kaltu are the newcomers that Innocence used to bolster his religion, using the newcomer's fear of the cleansing fire for his own gain. While I would love that, the newcomers having great feasts and women doesn't really align with the image of terrified extraterrestrials burdened with the knowledge of a burning cosmic entity threatening their very existence that Sanctum lore painted. Rongokurai is the father of night, and the god Kahuturoa represents. I believe that Rongokurai is not a god many, if any, modern tribes follow, and this would explain why Kahu has been so disconnected from the goings-on of the living world. We haven't seen Rongokurai mentioned before this league, and all we learn of him now is in relation to his brother, Ramako, and the drama between the gods. But we still have to talk about Tawhanuku. Is Tawhanuku of the Hinekora tribe the oldest chieftain here? I have no idea. Honestly, probably not. But she tells us absolutely nothing about herself, or her life, or her god. She gives us parables about the values of every other chieftain, but when we ask her about herself, she chides us. The jester seeks to trip the chieftain. Not so. A chieftain always knows where she stands. Even though we are honored guests allowed to participate by Hinekora herself, the only mortals in the room, Tawhanuku compares us to a jester and refuses to tell us anything. Perhaps knowing how she feels about Hinekora, or who she was in life, would ruin something Hinekora is planning. The only straightforward answer Tawhanuku will give us is her opinion on the end of time. Maybe that's why every single chieftain has something to say about the end of time, because it's the only thing Tawhanuku will actually talk to them about. Most of the chieftains find Tawhanuku and her choice to participate in the trials strange, when Tawhanuku already knows ahead of time what we will do, mostly. Ahuana finds Tawhanuku unsettling, saying, "I don't know what to make of the Hinekora tribe. They have always lived halfway in death and halfway in life. Their eyes are elsewhere, and their words are meaningless. I certainly don't feel they are passing down any wisdom to their descendants when they speak in riddles." Tawhanuku is representing the Hinekora tribe, but even though Hinekora is the only god here in the halls, there is no interaction between the two, no mention of the other. After we slay the beast, Navali says that Hinekora is finally awake and the halls of the dead clamor with the joyous songs of our people. That doesn't seem to be the case. If anything, people are worried about Hinekora. She seems constantly within her visions, barely able to tell the difference between the current reality and other realities she has experienced. While what Hinekora says is extremely interesting to us as the player, the other chieftains are either confused, worried, or dismissive of Hinekora's return to the halls, not joyous and singing. Kaom believes she is lost in her visions, unsure whether Navali communicates Hinekora's will or if Navali speaks of her own accord due to Hinekora's haze. Hinekora will be discussed in extreme depth in the next video. But what is relevant to this video is that Hinekora and her tribe's obsession with the end of time has gotten every other tribe to chime in on their own ideas of how time will end. While some chieftains may be thinking about the end of time because it is the only escape from the halls of the dead, others seem quite certain of the exact situation that will cause this end, although none quite agree on how or when that will happen. Some of the chieftains view the end of time as gentle, like Maata, who sees the end of time as just part of the grand cycle. Like people itself, the world will die and with it, time. And then a new time will begin. Kahuturoa feels similarly, that the world will get tired and fall asleep, ending quietly during a night that goes on so long it blends into death itself. And then the sun will rise and time will begin again. Others have more catastrophic depictions of how time will end. Ikiaho is absolutely certain that the moon will crash into Rayclast, as the moon's path over many thousands of years is changing slightly toward us. What else could possibly happen when two titanic spheres of stone crash into each other? In the same vein, Ahuana believes that the sun will get too close to Rayclast and burn everything away, but once life returns that there will be a burst of verdancy unlike we have never ever seen. Kiloava believes that a raging storm will sweep everything away and leave a clean slate behind. Kaom might be the most grandiose, describing a tremendous eruption. Rayclast will stab itself and pour forth its lifeblood to burn away all life, both the mighty and the diseased, as it has done before. Then the first of a new line of Karui will emerge from the molten caldera as we did before, and that Kaom's soul will be returned to the volcano with all the others here in the halls of the dead, to be melted and reforged into the entirely new Karui essence, that new line. Neat. Utula does not care how time ends. He is more concerned that he will be in the halls until the end of time itself. When I ask how long that is, they all give me a different answer. He worries that he will be here forever if time never ends. Rakiata is not concerned with the end of time because they focus on the present, encouraging us to live for today. Akoya's story is the most abstract, about warriors becoming so filled with bloodlust that they all kill each other until the absolute strongest remains, and his dead body will become the new world. Akoya is also the only one who both describes how time will end and recognizes that it's just a story to describe the same event. Each tribe has its own belief about how the world will end, but you must understand these tales do not conflict. They are all correct. Although Tawhanuku seems certain that time will end, and implies that time has ended before, she is uncertain of how it will happen this time. No matter how long it truly ends up being, existence always feels too short a season. Lucky are those who get to do it all over again once time begins anew. For what purpose does Tawhanuku insist on the end of time? It's the only end for the trials, sure, but that was before Hinekora returned. She created them, couldn't she end them? Is the end of time a figure of speech for the conclusion of Path of Exile's story, before it begins again with Path of Exile 2? Is the end an inevitable, literal event, or is it just a philosophical question for the chieftains to consider, to break up the monotony of their trials? I think it's all of the above. It is very eerie that the end of time is the only topic every chieftain will discuss. It doesn't feel like a warning. it is a foregone conclusion. Now that we know more about the chieftains we fight in the trials, let's dive into some of the stories they tell about the gods they represent. Of course, we have already killed two of these gods, Tukohama and Kitava, and many of the other gods, Tasalio, Valako, Ngamahu, are missing in action. But three of the gods represented in these halls are discussed in depth by not only the chieftains representing them, but others, unveiling connections between the Karui and Solaris and Lunaris, and what caused the sisters' eternal war. The new lore we get regarding the Karui gods is a tale of a sordid love affair between Ramako, Sione, mother of the sun, and Lanihua, mother of the moon. The mother of the sun, Sione, lived alone in a jade palace in the sky. At that time, the sun was no brighter than any other star, and it was verdant green. Sione, however, was the most ambitious of the gods. She invited Ramako over to her palace for a feast, even though her tribe was poor and starving. She painted her entire palace gold, so that when Ramako entered her golden palace, his light reflected countless times, blazing warmth and life all over the world. Ramako was so impressed by her apparent wealth, they went through the traditions together, with Kahuturoa even describing Ramako as Sione's husband. Sione's gamble worked, as the pairing brought prosperity to her tribe. But apparently Ramako can't stand her, and secretly longs for Lanihua, the mother of the moon, who is kind and caring to all and very beautiful as well. Ramako goes to our father of night, Rongokurai, and asks for the cover of darkness to secretly visit Lanihua without his wife knowing. Poor Rongo, being a good brother, obliges. Ramako sneaks over to Lanihua's place under the cover of Rongokurai's night, and fathers Arohongui. This affair angers Sione so much that the sun becomes so bright, fire scorches the world. Kahuturoa's tribe survives that fire easily because they tend to live in caves, but Lanihua, being a natural healer, steps in to preserve the rest of the Karui. Side note, Kahu mentions his tribe living in caves. This reminded me of Emperor Chittis's letter to his uncle Kadiro about Izaro, the emperor at that time who descended from one of the first Asmiri to call themselves eternal. Chittis refers to Izaro creating his labyrinth, a trial to pick the next emperor based on ancient Asmirian traditions, as such. He would have us entrust our imperial leadership to the primitive diversions of some cave-dwelling ancestors. Kahuturoa called the Asmiri his friends, so perhaps his tribe and the ancient Asmiri were socially or geographically close or entwined if they both lived in caves. This incident, Ramako visiting Lanihua in the night for this affair, is believed to be the story of Arohongui's birth, and also the reason that Sione and Lanihua, aka Solaris and Lunaris, have been at war with each other ever since. Let's start with Arohongui's birth. Ikiaho believes that Ramako loved Lanihua, and that is why the Ramako tribe, like us, often uses ice and cold in their war-making. That is because Ramako has long loved Lanihua, Arohongui's mother, in secret. He fights not for himself, but for her. If it was known that Ramako had feelings for Lanihua, it would make sense that Rongokurai, trying to be a good brother, would help him. But Ramako claims it was not him who snuck to Lanihua's house on the night that Lanihua got pregnant with Arohongui. Someone used Rongokurai's cover of night, but Ramako claims it wasn't him. He calls his brother a liar, and now Ramako and Rongo don't speak. Ramako claims he wasn't even the one to ask Rongokurai to create darkness for him. Someone impersonated Ramako to go see Lanihua, and to ask Rongokurai for darkness. Even Ikiaho agrees Ramako is not Arohongui's father. She says, "We follow Arohongui with utmost loyalty, but my tribe certainly noticed that she never expressed any divine abilities that have to do with light or warmth. I have long suspected that there is something within each of us, some pattern or essence of who we are, that each parent passes down to a child. If my suspicion is correct, then it is not possible that Ramako is Arohongui's father. Furthermore, she has an idea of who this person might be, but she is unwilling to disclose who. There is only one sensible conclusion, and that we keep to ourselves, so as not to disrupt the balance of the skies. This dialogue is called The Deceiver, and the other chieftains who discuss this story use that title as well. At first, one might think that Rongokurai himself was the one who used his own night to sneak and see Lanihua. And some might say that Arohongui's darker tendencies align with Rongokurai's night. Many associate the night with evil. Not so. The night shrouds the innocent, hiding them from those who would do harm. Maybe this assumption is why Rongokurai's followers have disappeared, but I don't believe Rongo is the father. I believe this deceiver is none other than Tangmazu, the trickster god and voice of delirium. For starters, we already know Tangmazu's claim to fame is that he tricked Solaris and Lunaris, and his trick started their eternal war. Kahuturoa says that Arohongui being born is why Sione goes to war against Lanihua, and they have been fighting ever since. Immediately that lines up. But Ahuana elaborating on Arohongui's powers, her inheritance, is what seals it. Arohongui has abilities prone to darkness and illusions, quite unlike Ramako's golden strength and honesty. There is a tale, very rarely told, of a deceiver being caught and locked away for this crime. Darkness and illusions are absolutely Tangmazu's realm, and while I don't know if Tangmazu was caught, the perfidy flavor text makes even more sense now. It says Tangmazu turned day and night against each other. While day and sun could be synonyms, night and moon are not quite right. But if day and night are Ramako and Rongokurai, it's even more fitting. It now encompasses all parties who were affected by this deception. Tangmazu says that turning the celestial sisters against each other was not hard, that it just took a nudge. If it's true that Ramako was in love with Lanihua, then Tangmazu pretending to be Ramako, using an illusion perhaps, would be an easy way to trick Rongo and Lanihua and make it difficult for Sione to believe Ramako when he says it was not him. It is a perfect situation to cause chaos in. I don't think we knew exactly how Tangmazu had turned the sisters against each other before now, so this story is quite the revelation. But it leaves us with the fact that Tangmazu, the terrifying delirium voice of madness and despair, has a daughter who is also a god. Luckily, Arohongui does not seem to share Tangmazu's disposition, if she shares some of his powers. She is a healer, and uses her power of illusion to help ease the pain of those who are wounded or dying, for example. Sione and Lanihua have been absent from the Karui people since this war started. Ahuana says that the Ramako tribe considers the matter of Arohongui's birth and parentage settled, but Sione and Lanihua continue to battle for eternity in distant realms. They do not listen to us. They do not listen to anyone. All they care about is vengeance. Some believe the sun and moon have abandoned the Karui people entirely, but Ikiaho of the Arohongui tribe has a different perspective, because her god is helping heal soldiers of this war. While the birth of Arohongui did spark Solaris and Lunaris' eternal war, their war quickly turned from fighting each other to fighting something else. Ikiaho says, "Many believe that the Mother of the Moon has been fighting a war against the Mother of the Sun for thousands of years. While Lanihua is indeed absent, it is not to fight against her sister. Arohongui heals wounded warriors in her palace, and they speak not of war with Sione, but of a war with the stars themselves." Apparently, the two sisters did go out into the night sky to wage war upon one another. But when they got there, they encountered something horrible, something that drives even the strongest warrior to madness and panic. We have not been abandoned by our two strongest gods. They are out there protecting us, and they cannot rest for even a moment. I suspect whatever Sione and Lanihua are fighting in the sky is a cosmic force, something like the Elder, the Maven, or the Scourge. It's hard to say what they were fighting, how long they fought it, if they succeeded or failed, because we fully kill Solaris and Lunaris in Act 8. So if that war was still ongoing, there might be or might have been some consequences. And for sure, no Karui will be hearing from their missing gods, Sione or Lanihua, anytime soon. Perhaps Navali didn't see fit to tell the chieftains that we kill the sisters, as Sione and Lanihua have no chieftain representatives. Or maybe Solaris and Lunaris are not actually Sione and Lanihua, so their deaths would have no relevance in the halls of the dead. But I can't imagine that Sione and Lanihua are not Solaris and Lunaris. The eternal war, Tangmazu causing it, even the description of their temperaments matches perfectly with all other sources we've seen. Solaris being hot-headed, confident, judging, and Lunaris merciful and the mother of dreams and inspiration. Hargan even says dreams harbor nightmares and that inspiration is just one notion shy of insanity, in regards to Lunaris being the mother of dreams and inspiration, and nightmares and insanity are Tangmazu's thing, Arohongui's too. And Lunaris is the mother of them. With all of this information about the chieftains and the gods they represent, we have plenty to chew on. It sets the stage for more gods to be found in areas we haven't traversed, or to be hiding away and not messing with mortal life. It gives insight into life on Namakanui, which is not necessarily one place or even a set group of islands. Although there is some mention of a West Namakanui, which is a strange place, but that's all we know of it. Kahu says that there are tribes in western Namakanui beyond Ezamir, with gods most of us are barely aware of. Those tribes are strange, and we don't go there. We learn more about how the Karui people interacted with other groups throughout all the history we have been exposed to so far in Path of Exile lore, going all the way back to before the fall of the Vol, and spanning concepts as wild as the Lake of Kalandra and cosmic horrors in the night sky. Even with all of this information, this more factual or basic information, we haven't even touched on what I would consider the meat of lore in this league, which centers around Hinekora and Navali. But we need to have this groundwork laid in the realm of reality to understand and juxtapose the ramblings of Hinekora, and begin to unravel what she's even saying and why she has invited us to these halls. Thank you so much for watching. It's your boy Noodle. If you haven't seen it, I was able to interview Matt, the lead narrative writer for GGG at ExileCon, and that was such a huge highlight for me. Sorry if this audio sounds a little crazy, my computer's having some problems, so I couldn't really fix any of the glitches or this outro. This video took a while to make, obviously. We've still got the big theory video to accompany it on the way. Drink from the well of passing and stay sane, exiles.